For the first class of Hobby Azon, we are actually going to be talking about researching the hobby just to make sure it is actually a good choice to use for this strategy. In most cases, you should find that pretty much any hobby should fit the bill here, but there is still a chance that some of them just may not be a good idea to pursue for one reason or another. And so that's really what tonight's class is focused on, is learning how to do a little bit of work to make sure that the later work going into putting all this together to make sure that will actually end up successful. Now ultimately, we are going to be not only researching our hobby in this class, you're also going to essentially learn how to analyze the audience potential for this particular hobby that you might want to pursue. This is really important, and it's a key part of this particular strategy because the website itself that you will end up building in this class, it can attract Google traffic just fine. It actually can get really great Google rankings because there is a strong focus on the content on these websites. However, because we are dealing with a hobby niche here, people are a lot more inclined to actually want to talk about these things. They want to engage with others, they want to share their experiences, and typically they're looking to kind of constantly be learning and growing within their industry. So all of this wrapped up together, when you combine an audience with your actual website as well, you not only have access to the recurring Google traffic, but then you also have access to drive that audience to your website whenever you want to. So with that said, I want to go into a slight overview of this entire strategy, and then we'll be diving into tonight's actual training, which will be involving the hobby research. So first of all, the idea behind Hobby Azon is all about the things that I was just talking about. The simple fact that people are pretty engaged in their hobbies. They spend a lot of money on their hobbies. They spend a lot of their free time on their hobbies. And in fact, they will really involve their life even more than that in their hobbies a lot of times. Some people might be at work and browsing the internet looking up information about their hobby. So with that said, this is really a prime candidate for building an Amazon affiliate website because you have a really eager customer base, typically with a lot of expendable income, and you don't really have to seek them out. A lot of times they will seek you out because of that extreme interest in the hobby. So the first part of this entire strategy is building an audience. You need to have access to people that are into your hobby that you could then drive along to a website. The audience is something that ultimately can be built in a number of different ways. The main focus that I am going to be teaching you guys in this series will involve building your own Facebook group. However, I will be talking about a number of other different strategies that can also be used, especially if you don't actually want to start up your own Facebook group. The website is simply going to be dependent upon what your hobby wants. Are they looking for tutorials on various things to teach them how to do stuff? Do they want to learn how to use products the right way? Are there different secrets and kind of tips that people learn over the course of time in that hobby that ultimately would really help out the beginners that are just getting started. Whatever it is that your hobby ultimately craves, the information that they consume, that is really what you are out to try to deliver to them. And we'll be talking about how you can actually figure out what that is before we actually get into learning how to put all that into a final website. Now finally, we have continual marketing. This is simply where we continually utilize that audience that we have built. We continue to engage with them, and when simply we want to, we can share more information on our website with them. We can build the website over the course of time, and every time we publish a new page, we can share it with our audience and automatically drive a large amount of traffic to it on the very first day that we even have a page published. And you can actually get this done on the very first day that you have your website live on the internet, for that matter. You build the site, you build the audience while you are building your website, and by the time you are finished with your website, then you automatically have all this free marketing that is ready to drive to it. Now ultimately, this strategy is a little more involved than what I typically do as an Amazon affiliate, to build an Amazon affiliate website. It can kind of be scaled though, depending on how much work, how much effort you want to put into it, what your target income goals may be with it, and ultimately whether or not you really want to be doing this work yourself. It's certainly something that you can start small and build yourself and then end up outsourcing different parts of it or even the entire operation to other people within your hobby. Ultimately though, if you do decide to outsource, there are a lot of different places and ways that you can go about hiring people to help out with something like this. You could obviously go for people that do article writing and just hire an article writer to write articles for you. But the articles that you would get out of something like that, they're not really going to be the best for your hobby if the person is not already involved in your hobby. You're looking for that high quality information from somebody that is actually doing the stuff themselves. So if you don't have the knowledge yourself, perhaps, let's say maybe you even want to try to target a hobby that is not a hobby of your own, you could certainly try to find people within that hobby that are interested in earning some extra money while sharing their hobby with others, and you get them to run these different aspects such as adding content to your website or perhaps running the Facebook group for you. I'm really more of a technical person myself. I don't socialize a whole lot in my spare time. I do have a Facebook account, for example, but I honestly do not spend much time on Facebook. It's not something that I go and do for fun like a lot of people do. However, my hobby is actually the same hobby as my wife's hobby. And she loves Facebook. She loves spending time on it. She loves socializing with people. So we have actually attacked this ourselves, where I handle the website end, all the technical type of things, and she handles the social end, essentially building the audience. While I'm, not exactly hiring her, we're kind of partnering together on this venture. It's still something that could be done with a completely random person that is simply into that hobby, somebody that has a lot of knowledge. So, consider that going into this whole strategy. If you do find that, you would like to outsource, I would simply strongly recommend that you focus on people that could deliver a really high quality experience. Sometimes You may pay them up front, to do hourly work, for example. You might have certain people in your hobby, though, that just really enjoy doing it. And maybe they're already going to be sharing their hobby with everyone anyways, and maybe they would do it for some kind of a percentage of your profits. So it's something that they could kind of work for building over the course of time. So even if you don't have, say, a lot of money up front that you would be interested in, using to hire people or to help get something like this started, you may be able to get free help by simply, arranging some type of a partnership with somebody where they simply get a percentage of the earnings going forward. Now, beyond hobbies itself, there is the potential that this strategy could work for a niche that is not hobby related. However, it is really important that you do an extensive amount of research if you are thinking about using this strategy for a non-hobby niche. Ultimately, if it is not something that people want to engage in conversation about, if there are not a lot of popular Facebook groups out there about it already, and if people aren't really active on those Facebook groups, chances are it would be pretty hard to get something started up like that. There are just certain categories, certain types of products that people might buy a lot, but they just don't really have any interest in talking with others about. Whereas hobbies, people get pretty excited about their hobbies. And a lot of times they may not know somebody in person that actually does the same hobby as them. For years, my particular hobby, I didn't know anybody in person besides my wife that actually did this hobby. Everything that we did relating to it was based online. And so that's kind of where this entire concept grew from. Now I want to dive into talking about how we actually do this research for a particular hobby that you are thinking about targeting. I basically have a 4-step process that I go through. I first research the products, then I research keywords, then I research the audience, and finally I try to figure out what those missing pieces are. Essentially, what is it that my hobby is craving? What kind of information are they looking for out there? After getting all of this information together, you can really get a clear picture on whether or not it would be a good idea to proceed with targeting a particular hobby or not. So to start, we're going to be doing the product research. Product research obviously is going to be heavily based on the Amazon website. You're wanting to sell Amazon products as an Amazon affiliate, and so obviously you would want to go and check out the products there. However, there is more to this strategy than that. On my website, for my hobby, I actually have a lot of products that I promote that I recommend for people to buy, and I tell them not to buy them on Amazon. I'll send them to a local retail store for it because it might be more convenient, and especially it might have the best price on the product. However, there are other things that are not easily found in local retail stores that are essentially made for the hobbyist, made for special purposes, and they're really only easily found on the internet. These are really more the things that I have focused on recommending to the people that visit my website. So I'm not just blindly telling them to buy every single thing that I can find related to this hobby. I'm being realistic about it. I'm looking at what products do I actually use? What purposes do I use them for? Are they beneficial to me or not? And ultimately, where did I buy my own products? Where did I find the best price at? And so I pass the same recommendations along to my audience and along to the people that are visiting my website. So with that said, I want to start out by making a basic list of products that are used in my hobby. You can just simply pull out a notepad on your computer and write out a general list of different products that you can think about. This can be specific brands and models that you may already use, or it could be more of a general type of product. For example, I guess so far I have not actually mentioned what my hobby is in this particular class. My hobby is actually growing carnivorous plants. And a big part of this hobby, besides getting the actual plants themselves, is providing the proper type of environment for them to grow in. Because a lot of times the plants aren't naturally from wherever you live. Some of the plants might be locally found, but then there are at least some plants that I grow that come from the opposite side of the world, in tropical areas at the top of mountains. And so they have very particular environment requirements, and so there's a whole lineup of products that I basically end up needing to satisfy this type of stuff. There's pretty basic things like some T5 growing lights. If I wanted to be growing the plants indoors, I could simply have some growing lights and some type of metal rack for the plants to be sitting on. I might also have some plant trays, some plant pots, and even soil, which the soil for these plants is actually kind of complicated. You have to get very particular things to mix up to provide for them. They can't just grow outside in normal dirt. Going beyond that, I have plants that I can grow outside. But again, they can't grow in the soil. They have to grow in a very special kind of soil. So I actually use it's basically a really large Tupperware bin. They're actually stock ponds, basically. And I fill this up with soil, and then I plant the plants in them. These things I've really never been able to find in a local retail store. And they're not cheap, but they're pretty easy to find on Amazon, and they're actually at least a decent price depending on the size that you want to get. They can range from $100 all the way up to $500 plus just for one of these large plastic stock ponds, basically. Now the hobby gets even more complicated from there if you want to get into the plants that are basically not from your native area, and they really can't survive in the conditions of your house. This is basically the plants that grow in tropical types of climates. Personally, I don't live in a tropical climate. I have not really harsh winters here, but we do have below freezing winters and occasionally get some snow. And these plants will die off if temperatures drop below, say, about 40-45 degrees or so. But the trick, though, is that they actually need special conditions beyond what can be provided outside of my house or even inside of my house. They need warm days, but these plants grow in the mountains in tropical areas, and so they actually like cold nights. So I need to provide daytime temperatures of like 75 degrees Fahrenheit and nighttime temperatures of like 50 degrees Fahrenheit to these plants. This is something that not everybody in this hobby really gets into because it requires a pretty extensive setup to actually accomplish it. But it's not something that is commercially sold. companies don't cater to these types of products. So what I have actually done is to buy products that are commercially available and modify them to be used for the purposes that I need them for. And so I can not only recommend the products for people to buy, but I can also recommend how they go about utilizing these products in the right way to really be able to hit these upper levels of this hobby. So I have a lot of stuff that I can target to complete beginners, and then I have a lot of stuff that I can kind of target to more of the experts in this hobby too. Things like this would involve air conditioners, basically materials to build growing chambers. Basically a large wooden frame that's completely sealed up and waterproof and even insulated, and you simply grow the plants inside of these. The materials to build these things can be really, really extensive. The air conditioner obviously is used for nighttime cooling, but there's kind of some particular things about an air conditioner that ultimately really don't work out very good for these plants. An air conditioner is meant to keep people comfortable in their house at a cooler temperature than what is outside. Part of being comfortable for people is actually having the humidity pretty low. An air conditioner will actually strip the humidity out of the air. I not only need cold air, but I need that air completely saturated with humidity. So I basically need the opposite of an air conditioner. So I've actually taken an air conditioner and went and bought it from the store and completely destroyed it, took it apart, and used it to create a water chiller. They do sell water chillers commercially, but they're outrageously expensive, like $500 to $1,000. But you can buy a $100 air conditioner and make it into a water chiller and obviously save a ton of money in the process. Now there's all kinds of fans, lights, timers, environment controllers, humidity generators, ductwork, and all kinds of other stuff that really goes into just one of these projects involving creating a growing area for these plants. So just this little list here that I was able to come up with pretty quickly is a really good foundation that I can get started on. And that's basically what you're looking to do for any hobby that you are wanting to target. Just think about what products are used in that hobby. Think about what a beginner would really be more interested in. A lot of times they might not be looking to spend a ton on the hobby. They're kind of looking to get their feet wet with it and see if they like it. Then once they get into it, they get a little more addicted to the hobby. Then they start to go a little crazier with it, and they start wanting to learn new things and try harder stuff. So you can really target a variety of different experience levels in the process of kind of figuring out which products you would really want to be promoting to these people. We have products that are basically general hobby products. These will be the products that basically your beginner would need. What's the bare minimum requirement to really participate in that hobby? For me, it might just be something as simple as soil and pots to put the plants in and some kind of a light source. And a lot of people could even use the sun. So ultimately, I could teach somebody to get started in carnivorous plants for probably about $20 or so. But then for a really specific hobby project, like building a growing chamber for these highland tropical plants, something like that would involve a really large list of products. And The project itself could be $1,000 or $2,000 to actually put this whole thing together. So my list of products here can really cover a wide spectrum of different purposes and different experience levels of people. Now ultimately, I want to take this list that I have been building and I want to then take it over to Amazon to do some fairly basic research on it. You don't really have to go crazy with this type of stuff. You basically want to find out though what the Amazon ASIN and the price for it is. Record the title and even a link to it if you want to, just to help yourself figure out exactly what it is that you found and make it easy to return to it in the future. You can even look at things like reviews to figure out whether it would even be a good product to try to sell on Amazon. You can look at stuff like shipping costs. Maybe it's free shipping on Amazon Prime. Things like that can be kind of a selling point to a lot of people that are looking into buying products there. So this is really what you're looking to do on Amazon. Just do some basic research on the different types of products that you actually want to be promoting. So for example, a T5 light set, I'll just pick the first one off of the list, even though no, this is a different brand from at least the ones that I personally own. Just to give you an example here though, I can record a link to that so I can get back to this product in the future. I can also record the product ASIN, which is a series of letters and numbers. It's always going to start with the letter B and the number 0 after that. This is something that I can easily use to not only get back to the product in the future, but I can also use this to link up to the product in the future as well, to create an affiliate link for it. So I can just record some basic information here, like the title, and the fact that it's $147. I can also look at the customer reviews for this product, and I can see whether it's actually a good product that I would want to recommend to people. Now obviously, if this is a hobby that you practice yourself and you have first-hand knowledge of these products, it makes this process much, much easier. You probably know the products that you use already yourself for your hobby, whether or not they're a good product or not, whether you would actually recommend someone else in that hobby buying that same product, or whether you would say, save your money, go with something else instead. So that alone can kind of simplify this process and lead you straight to the exact ones. Otherwise, you might need to take a little more time and effort, look at the reviews for the product, try to figure out which one really is the best, basically. This particular one has free shipping, another plus when you're dealing with some of the larger, heavier products in certain hobbies at least. If they're not part of a free shipping or Amazon Prime program, they can sometimes get a little costly to actually be able to send to somebody. That makes it a lot harder to refer a sale on it. It also makes it a lot more likely that a local retail store may simply have a better price. So once you have gone through and done this same type of research on each of the products that you have come up with, I won't do this in the live class because going through all these different products and recording this information would probably be pretty boring from just sitting there watching it. The concept here is still the same though. You record the same information. And when you are done with all of this information, you'll have it that you can refer back to later. You can compare this to prices on other websites, prices in local retail stores, for example, to really be able to point people in the best direction to buy the product. For my particular hobby, there are really not a lot of great places to find these products in person. Lowe's and Walmart and Home Depot, to a certain extent, do carry at least some products that are needed for my hobby, but there are particular things that are really more specialized type of products that the average person likely isn't going to be buying unless they are involved in that exact hobby. Those kind of products are not usually found in your big box stores like that, simply because not enough people buy them. But when you are dealing with people that are really interested in a hobby, they will search high and low for these types of products. And often they end up simply purchasing them online. So I not only want to figure out what all this stuff is going to cost on Amazon and whether or not it would be a good idea to try to sell that product on Amazon, but then I want to try to figure out, is that really the best place to buy each product? I can check other online stores related to my hobby or simply any place that I can find those products being sold and do the same type of research. Record a link, record a price for it, so you can refer back to it later and ultimately figure out, what the best deal is, where should you really point people to when it comes to buying that product. Also check your local retailers. It can be kind of time consuming to try to do that in person. You can check your local retailers a lot of times, at least the big box ones. You can check them simply by going to their websites. For example, I could look at air conditioners, another potential product that I would be recommending to some people, and I could try to figure out a specific air conditioner on Lowe's, a specific air conditioner on Walmart, and even that exact air conditioner on Amazon, and really find out, where is the best place to direct people to buy this. I did the same research when I was trying to buy these products for myself, for my own use in the hobby. And so I do automatically know that the local retail stores actually deliver a lower price on these window air conditioner units, which is what I bought and destroyed and took apart. They're actually cheaper in the local retail store than they are on Amazon. They're actually a lot more expensive on Amazon than they are to buy locally. So even though I might be talking about a $100 or $200 product here, I'm not going to recommend that people buy this thing on Amazon, because if they ultimately figure out that it is a lot cheaper in a local retail store, and they suspect that I might have that knowledge too, they're just going to lose all trust in anything that my website recommends. If they can see, though, that I am out for their best interest, that I am genuinely trying to say, this is indeed the best place to buy the product because I bought it for myself and did this research already. They build a level of trust with you. They trust the things that you say. They trust the products that you recommend. And so then when you are recommending Amazon products to them, they're a lot more likely to trust that it is going to be the best deal, and ultimately that you're not just pushing it on them to try to get them to complete a sale so you can earn a commission. So using your product list, again, you want to go back through not only on Amazon, but looking at other online websites and even the local retail stores to try to figure out, just like I've been talking about, what is the best deal? Where should you be pointing people to? The next step is going to be doing keyword research. The keyword research, again, is not something that you have to put a ton of time or effort into. This is really more of a step to just make you aware of things that people do search for and things that maybe they don't search for within your hobby. Ultimately, you want to try to look a little beyond the keywords that you might normally try to put together for any given niche. You might typically go for, just basic types of things like the names of products, brand names, the types of products, and just kind of general niche keyword phrases. But you really want to go deeper than that this time and think about what people do in that hobby. What is involved with it? Is it different projects that they're doing all the time, building things? Are they participating in different activities? Is it some kind of, craft or something else that they are doing? Ultimately, everything hobby related has some kind of this, activity or project that is associated with it. And you could likely come up with a pretty decent list of them. You also have the things like the products that you just got done coming up with. You can use those same type of product names for potential keywords, but again, you don't want to make that the only thing that you are going after. It can also just be standard words that relate to what your niche is, the different aspects of your hobby. So ultimately, anything that you can think of relating to your hobby in a short, generalized phrase, just try to make a list of as many different things as you can ultimately think of. So I could start by going with carnivorous plants, and then I can get deeper and actually start listing different species of carnivorous plants. In addition to listing different species, there are actually all different kinds of varieties and things like that that exist within each of these, different types of each of these kinds of plants, basically. Ultimately, for each of these different kinds of plants here, this one, Nepenthes, this is the one that grows in the tropical climates on the other side of the world. There are a couple hundred known species or varieties of Nepenthes, and they each have a name associated with them. Going on down the list, this same thing applies for all of these different ones. Some of them have more or less than others. Cephalotus, this one grows in Australia. This actually only has one species. This one has maybe around 10 or so. This one has a couple hundred. This one only has one. There are actually another 4 or 5 different kinds of carnivorous plants besides even the ones that I have listed here. So just starting with some basic terminology, I could easily come up with a huge extensive list of 500 to 1,000 keywords, just listing all the different types of carnivorous plants. I could continue on listing out different activities or types of projects. Things like bog gardens, growing lights, growing chambers, environment control. All of these different things are basically different things that people would want to create or things that they would want to learn about relating to the hobby. They could even be, projects like building a bog garden or building a growing chamber. So I would simply want to continue on here and come up with, again, as many different of these keyword phrase possibilities as I could think of. This is for the purposes of research, so I could then go and find out, do people actually search for all of these different phrases or not? But it's also going to be useful for me in the future when it comes time to write my content or to figure out what my website content is going to be about, or to figure out the things that I want to try to target to my audience. By knowing what's more popular than other things, then I can simply make better decisions. So using this information, once you get this list of all these different potential keyword phrases, if you can, try to organize them in some way. Like you might have different projects, you might have different activities, you might have different product names. For me, I have different species of plants and things of that nature. So, I could kind of break this list of keywords down into a number of different categories. And that'll just simply make this a little easier to refer back to in the future and try to find a certain keyword that I might be looking for, or to try to figure out, what kind of content I actually want to put on my website. So the first step of this is going to be to take this list of keywords and to run it through the Google Keyword Planner. The Google Keyword Planner is, while you need a Google AdWords account, you don't have to actually use it. You can see right here, I don't have any payment methods on file with them. So I don't actually do AdWords advertising. I just use this as a tool to research keywords, just to find out what type of search volume might be related to these different phrases. So I can then take my list of keywords and one by one run them through the keyword planner just to try to find out, are people searching for this? And if so, how many people are actually searching for information? You can see here for carnivorous plants that there actually are quite a few people that search for it. When I hover over this little graph icon here, I can even figure out how this traffic kind of varies throughout the year. You can see here from November through February or so, there's the lowest traffic of the year on this particular keyword. But then when you're into the warmer months of the year, at least in the northern hemisphere, you have more traffic with these phrases. So it's a little bit seasonal, more towards the warmer months of the year. There's really only about a third of the year or so where traffic is lower than normal. And there's still a very healthy amount of traffic during those times of the year too. So it does have some seasonal tendencies to it, but it is not something like swimming pools or snow skiing where you are going to have a very obvious market during a certain season of the year, and then you have a very steep traffic drop-off for the other times of the year. I simply want to use this Google information as a bit of a reference to help me to figure out what people are looking for and what they might not be looking for. I don't have to go into a ton of detail, but at least on a lot of my important keyword phrases, I might just simply jot down how many average monthly searches there are. So I'll put 40,500 for carnivorous plants. You can see there are other different phrases here. Venus flytrap, this is actually the scientific name for it here. So I could just record this one down below it. Pitcher plant can actually refer to a number of different kinds of carnivorous plants. There are certain words, though, that actually talk about the same thing in this particular hobby. Nepenthes, one of the other types of carnivorous plants here that I wrote out, has the same amount of traffic as carnivorous plants. They also have other names though. Some people call them monkey cups. There's 1,000 people a month that search for that, and a number of other related keyword phrases as well. They're also sometimes called the Asian pitcher plant, or sometimes even the tropical pitcher plant. So there's some people that are searching for that one, and there should also be people searching for this phrase as well. So, you know, different varieties of essentially the same thing that you can think of. It's worth figuring out, you know, whether people are searching for these phrases or not, because you can make sure that you include content on your website about it, or just simply use these phrases somewhere within articles that you are writing out, just to try to make sure you are, you know, including these important keywords in your content. By continuing through all of your different keywords in that same manner, you get, you know, a general sense of what is strong, what might be worth pursuing, and again, you know, just simply what words you might want to be sure to use within your content. The next part of this, once you have the keyword traffic for each of your keyword phrases figured out, you want to go a little bit deeper and try to figure out the search traffic competition for maybe not all of your phrases, but at least for some of them, just to get an idea of, you know, is it going to be really hard to get search rankings for this hobby? Can you talk about the hobby in a very vague, general sense and expect to get search rankings, or will you need to basically be targeting really specific topics within your entire hobby? So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. If I took the keyword phrase carnivorous plants and searched for it, but included this search around it, I use the phrase all in title and then a colon and then put quote marks around my keyword phrase. This tells me how many pages there are that are at least indexed in Google that have that keyword phrase in the title of their page. Ultimately, this may not be a perfect indication of competition for a certain niche or a certain keyword phrase, but I have found that it is a pretty good general indication as to whether or not a lot of other websites are trying to pursue that keyword. Basically, how many other pages or how many other sites would you really be in competition with if you wanted to create content about this topic and ultimately hope to get, say, a top 10 Google ranking for this topic? For this search, I have found 79,700 results. This is actually super, super high. This is a pretty large number of pages on the internet that have the phrase carnivorous plants in the title. Ultimately, it would be pretty hard to get a top 10 Google ranking on something like this. Even going after, say, a specific variety of these carnivorous plants, you may even find that the results go up. So there's even more places that are talking about this specific type of carnivorous plant than are carnivorous plants in general. I could try to dig a little bit deeper and look at individual species and varieties of these plants. This is really when I start to see the competition drop to a realistic level. There's around 1,000 results here, a little bit over 1,000 results for this particular search, which is for a specific type of carnivorous plant. This is really more what I'm looking for. I'm looking for keywords that are around 1,000 results. I might be willing to go higher than that, upwards of, say, 5,000, maybe even 10,000, if it is a keyword that I think I can provide a lot of information about. Ultimately, though, if you are dealing with keywords that have substantially more than 1,000 results for this all-in-title search, you're going to have to deliver a lot of content to be able to get into the top 10, and or you're going to have to generate a lot of links to that content or even social media interaction with that content. For the average page, though, if you are thinking about creating, say for example, for my site, a page that targeted each of these individual types and species of carnivorous plants, there's a lot of them. You know, there's 500 plus different species of carnivorous plants. So that would be a lot of pages to try to build on my website. I could look at the most popular ones, though, and also try to figure out which of those have the lowest competition, and I could narrow that list down substantially to try to just target, you know, possibly a couple dozen of them or something like that. This would still give me access to the traffic, but at simply a lower amount of work. Unless, of course, I could build a lot of content about those topics. Then I could consider going even higher in the result count. But this, again, is not something that you have to go through in detail on every single keyword you are thinking about using, but it can be used to give you a general sense of where a large portion of your content should really be focused in order to do the best in terms of Google search rankings and even search rankings off of other search engines besides Google. The next part of this is using something called Google Insights. Google Insights actually has a lot of different tools available to you. Within the page here, all of these different tools down here. The one that I'm really most interested in is one called Google Trends. However, instead of just directing you straight there, I wanted to point out Insights because at least with certain hobbies, Google may have some other information to you that could be really, really useful. They might have some consumer surveys that relate to your hobby that you may potentially be able to utilize, just as an example. For the purposes of this training, though, I want to talk to you more about making sure your hobby is not in the process of dying off. You don't want to put a lot of work into creating something like this just to figure out 2 years from now that nobody's doing your hobby anymore, that it's kind of died off as a fad, or maybe it's been replaced by something else. There are some hobbies that have, you know, a lot of longevity and may never die off. A lot of sports, for example, that have been around for 100 years or something like that. You know, they're pretty safe for the most part. But these days, you have a ton of different hobbies out there. You know, you have all kinds of different things, and some of them are just kind of passing crazes. They might be really popular for a few years, and then they're gone, or they die off to a really, really low level compared to what they used to be. Ultimately, you know, you want to be in a fairly stable hobby. You want to see that it's on the rise, or at least that it's not significantly declining. So Google Trends inside of Google Insights is a really good way to accomplish this. I could search for carnivorous plants, and when I do this, I come up with not only a search term option here, but there's actually an option for the plant itself. I'll come back to that in just a moment, just to show you a little bit of a difference. For carnivorous plants, when it says search term here, I'm dealing with the actual search keyword phrase. This is basically giving me information relating to traffic volume, the amount of interest that people have had in this search term over the course of time. So I not only get to figure out what has happened trend-wise on a monthly basis, like I get from the Google Keyword Planner with this graph here, but Google Trends lets me broaden my horizon beyond that and look at things on a monthly basis, but also spread out over the course of years. So I can kind of see what happens to this hobby every year in terms of interest, in terms of search traffic. Is it growing or is it in the process of dying? 2004 was really kind of the prime time for carnivorous plants. That's really more around the time that I actually got interested and into this type of thing. It's not that it has died off since then. It's still very alive and very popular, but it just may not be at its peak. But I can see that since its peak, at least back here, that it's been fairly stable. You know, a lot of its peaks seem to be hitting right around the same levels for at least the past 10 years or so. So this to me gives me a pretty immediate indication that the niche is fairly healthy, it's fairly stable. Even though the strongest time may have been in the past, that's quite okay. You're just looking for stability going into the future. You can also find out some demographics. You know, where is this topic the most popular? Are you in the right country to be targeting this type of hobby? Especially if you're trying to refer sales on Amazon.com products, for example. You simply want to have traffic that is actually going to be able to buy those products. So most of the time this would be USA traffic, especially when dealing with electronics products. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing related to plants, you really can't stretch outside of your own country. There's a lot of laws, including not really the products that are used for these plants, but the actual plants themselves. And so the communities for these plants kind of tend to stick to their own country. So in that regard, it's important for me to be able to find out, you know, how many people or what kind of an interest is there in the United States for this compared with other places in the world. Australia gets the #1 spot according to this particular search, but USA is in a close second. UK and Canada are not far behind it. So this is a pretty good indication for me that at least the USA would be a good place to try to target. You can even drill down your targeting over here as long as there is enough traffic on your topic, and sometimes find out, you know, how is it going in your actual country. In my country, it even looks more stable than the previous graph. And now I can find out, where is this the most popular in terms of states throughout the country. Out west looks to be pretty popular, and all the way along the East Coast and around the Great Lakes kind of seems to be the most common places. Granted, these are kind of the states with the most population in them as well. But some of the higher ones on the list, Hawaii, Washington State, Oregon, North Carolina, these are definitely not your most populous states in the country. So certain areas I might want to try to target more than other areas, especially if I decide to um, eventually put some advertising money into building up the audience for this website even more. So trends can not only tell you whether it's a good idea to dive into the hobby short term and even years into the future potentially, but it can also give you a lot of other really great information like demographics in terms of what people are actually interested in, that hobby and in different keywords relating to that hobby. Now the next part of this research involves the actual audience. We want to again try to compile another list here. This list is going to be considerably shorter than the previous ones though. This list is really just going to be a short listing of vague topics relating to my hobby that I could use to find different audiences. If it's a hobby that you're involved with, you should be able to have, some kind of an idea of, how are people kind of split up in your hobby? If you had to try to classify or organize people within your hobby into a number of different groups, what would those groups be? What would they be called? I obviously have the basis for my hobby, carnivorous plants. All of the other types of carnivorous plants are actually really good choices for this type of a list. I could go for scientific names, and I can also go for more common names. So while this isn't a extensive list, it's a good starting point that I could then use to try to help find some audiences that might relate to my hobby. So I'm going to take this list now and I'm going to do a few different things with it. The first thing that I'm going to do is to actually take this over to Facebook. And I want to try to find different Facebook groups that relate to this particular hobby. Now, this is actually the Facebook group that my wife and I started up not very long ago. We're actually already over 800 members and have a lot of interaction, a lot of posts that are taking place on a regular basis, and people engaging in conversation in it. They're also kind of already getting primed up for our website. We've been talking to them about the website that we are building while we are building this audience. And so we actually have a lot of people really eager to be seeing, the things that we're putting out there. So what we actually want to be doing at this point is figuring out, what exists already that is similar to, what it is that you'll eventually be wanting to do. So I can go up into the top bar here and I could search for carnivorous plants, and I could try to find groups relating to carnivorous plants. So right here is a carnivorous plant community with almost 9,000 members in this particular one. So I can just simply write this down. I could record the URL for this Facebook group, record the number of members that are in this Facebook group. If I can see the posts that are taking place in the group, then I can actually try to figure out, what kind of activity level is going on here. So seeing these other groups, seeing what they have to offer. If I can't get into it, I go ahead and request a link to join so I can eventually see inside of it and may be able to complete this research. the number of members gives me a pretty good idea of how much interest there really is, especially socially, in this particular hobby. And don't limit yourself to just one group either. There could potentially be a lot of groups out there relating to your particular topic. So for carnivorous plants, I can see not just this one really popular group, but actually a number of them. This one has 3,700. This one has 1,900. This one has almost 1,000, almost 1,000. There's mine and my wife's group at, again, almost 1,000. Even more of them, 5,000. Quite a few that have maybe 500 to 1,000 people in them. A number of them that are, 1,000 plus. So all these different groups, again, are not only indications of the levels that I might be able to reach with my group, but they also can potentially be really great places to begin marketing yourself. And also doing some research within your niche. What do people actually talk about having to do with your hobby? You can find that out by just going to these Facebook groups and browsing through the posts that people have made there. You can also use this to figure out, what people really want to see. Are there things even that are missing? This is something that I'll get to talking about in the next few minutes or so here. So go through your list. Again, like I mentioned, I just searched carnivorous plants here and was able to find all these different groups. So I can go through and join each of them. I could record a name, a number of people that are in each of them, some kind of general indication of the activity level that is taking place in each of them. And then I can repeat this same process for each of these other types of keyword phrases that I have. So in Nepenthes here, I can see that there are quite a few groups that were not the same groups that I was finding before. These specifically have to do with Nepenthes, and a lot of them have 2,000 plus members in them, it looks like. So the whole point of this is to figure out, is it going to be worth creating your own audience? And are there currently audiences out there that you might be able to tap into to help you build your own audience? We were able to find simply one other existing Facebook group having to do with our niche that was willing to allow us to share a link to our Facebook group in their Facebook group, simply because we were going to do something different from them. We were going to allow things that were basically against their rules. And so they were happy to kind of offload some of those people to us because they weren't wanting to do that type of thing in their group. So certain things like this can be really, really easily found and utilized to help you to get a really quick start. And this is something we'll be going a lot more into detail with next class, where we will be talking about actually creating and building up this audience for your hobby. So for now, you just simply want to do the research on making sure that it will be worth your efforts to actually build this type of thing. I would also encourage you to use Google a little bit to try to find some other sources of an audience that you might be able to tap into. In a lot of cases, one of the most common things that you will actually find out there, besides Facebook, besides other things like social media networks, will actually be forums or bulletin boards. Having to do with carnivorous plants, I can easily go out and find a number of very popular internet forums and bulletin boards, message boards, where people gather and engage about this particular hobby. A lot of other hobbies out there should have the same type of thing. And so I would highly encourage you to use Google to research them, to try to find them. Just simply attaching the word forum onto the end of whatever your hobby is, you could likely find something that you could end up targeting. So I could just say carnivorous plant forum, and I can immediately find Terraforums, the ICPS, Carnivorous Plants UK, Garden Web, Flytrap Care. All of these right here at the top, these are actually 5 of the most popular forums for this entire hobby. And it took a matter of a few seconds to find them. I know that these are the most popular because I've actually been using most of these forums for over a decade now. Google, though, knows this kind of stuff too, and it can lead you straight to the places you should really be looking. So use Google to find the forums relating to your hobby. Investigate them a little bit. Try to figure out, if you can, how many people are actually, on those websites. How often are posts taking place on them? A lot of forums, you can go down to the bottom and get some kind of stats. How many people are online at one time? How many total members do they have? How many posts do they really have? How many people are currently online? So the bottom of the forum is usually a key place to try to find this information. We'll give you a really quick indication as to what kind of activity level is really going on here. The other thing that you're looking for having to do with forums is whether or not it would be of any use to you in terms of helping you to build your audience and or helping you to drive more traffic to your website. Ultimately, you want a forum that is going to allow users to create their own links in one way or another. A really easy way to find this, besides trying to read through their rules, which sometimes can be pretty long, is just browse a number of different posts. Look and see down below each person's post in this area, look for signature links. There obviously are no signature links on this particular forum, but there may be links allowed within the actual post itself. These are potentially images. There's links. So people are posting links of some kind in this particular forum. So while the signature links might be out of the question, links within the actual posts are okay, at least to a certain extent, especially if it does not look like kind of a self-promotion. There's also other tricks that you can potentially engage in. You're going to have this huge audience that's interested in your hobby, and they're going to end up following you through that Facebook group and through your website. So you may be able to get some of these people to help to spread the word about your website, about your Facebook group. So you may not even have to do your own promotion on these other forums. You might be able to engage your audience to try to do this stuff for you, either out of the kindness of their heart, or maybe even by offering some type of a freebie giveaway. Now, in my industry, in my hobby, that's pretty simple to do. We have plants. Plants produce seeds. It's pretty easy to give away seeds or to give away even entire plants to people as simply a giveaway, freebies for whatever purpose. Could be, different types of contests and things of that nature. That's not going to work great in all hobbies, though. It's really just going to kind of depend on what the hobby is and what people really are after in that hobby. So the point of the forum research at this point is to simply find some more places that you might be able to utilize to help you to grow your audience or your website in the future. So you're just looking for different places that you might potentially be able to get links out on at some point. And you're also looking for, would that forum be worthwhile to bother with by trying to figure out how many people use the forum, how often are they actually on the forum engaging with that content. All that information down at the bottom of the forum can give you a pretty quick indication as to, whether something is popular or not. One other suggestion for hobbies in finding a potential audience. This may not be something that you would want to utilize when you're first getting started, but after you have a Facebook group built up with a decent audience in it, after you have a website built up with a decent amount of content, you may be able to consider targeting offline hobby gatherings that take place, maybe not in all hobbies, but in a lot of them. People are so devoted to them, they'll get together, they'll have these different clubs and events and things like that where they gather, they talk about stuff. You might have different sponsors for these events. You might have different, speakers or booths that are set up to sell things, to provide information. So, this is something to consider at least down the road if you want to start looking at, okay, what's the next step? I have, this hobby thing going pretty good. It's pretty popular, making some money. How do I expand it? The hobby offline gatherings can be at least one potential way to consider, that future expansion. So finally, you really want to be asking yourself, in addition to figuring out if the hobby is popular online and if people actually engage in that hobby, talking about things relating to that hobby, in addition to making sure that that traffic and that interest is there, you also want to try to figure out how could you squeeze your way into this hobby and essentially be able to get, the best and fastest possible results by doing so. There are a number of different ways that you can try to figure this out. Depending on how much you know about your hobby, you may already know this stuff right now. Or after hearing me talk about a number of these different situations, they may instantly pop into your head. For others, you may have to do a little more research. You may have to check out the different websites and Facebook groups and these different forums that you have been finding in your research so far and essentially use them as a reference tool. You want to try to find out what people want, but also what is not currently there. Or if it is there, if it's not done very well, if you feel like maybe it's incomplete or it could be done a lot better, or if maybe there's a lot of misleading information out there having to do with your industry, these are really prime situations that you can try to attack. So think about whether there is knowledge in your hobby that is essential. What do people need to know to get started in the hobby? What do they need to know if they have some experience in the hobby, but maybe they're looking to get a little more advanced with it, start tackling some, more expert subjects? What do they need to know to be able to do that stuff successfully, to not waste time, to not waste money in the process? And then more importantly, what is either not available in that regard, or if you can find that kind of stuff, what is not clearly explained, or what may simply be confusing. With my hobby, the products, the equipment that is typically used, this stuff is really not made for carnivorous plants. There really aren't manufacturers out there creating stuff just for carnivorous plant hobbyists. So that really leads to a lot of confusion, a lot of things not getting clearly explained in this particular hobby especially. I can help to fill in the gaps there to provide a lot of that information. These Facebook groups and these forums, they have a lot of people that talk about this kind of stuff already. It's not that I am looking to serve something that 100% doesn't exist out there, because chances are, whatever that important stuff is in your hobby, it probably exists in some degree or another. But it's a question of whether it's actually helping people or whether it's making it more difficult for them in the end. On the forums, for example, it can be really, really hard to find the exact information that you want. If you're brand new to carnivorous plants and all you want to do is buy a Venus flytrap and grow it in your house, sometimes you might have to search for hours on a forum to try to find that information. Once you find the post that has that information, you might have to go through pages and pages of replies to find all of the relevant stuff in there. So forums make a really good candidate for that. What's the most popular on a forum? How could you essentially portray that same type of knowledge and information, but in a clear, easy to understand manner, something that they're not going to have to dig for? The same kind of thing can also kind of apply to what people are buying for the hobby. What products do they need? How do they use those products? Is there limited commercial products that are even available for that hobby? I mentioned how there really are not manufacturers creating products for carnivorous plant enthusiasts. You have to use products that are intended for general gardening, perhaps, and try to apply it to carnivorous plants. Now that might seem, pretty simple. Well, wouldn't any old gardening type of stuff work for carnivorous plants? They're plants, after all. The thing is, though, most plants grow in alkaline soil. If you were to test the soil in your yard or in your flower bed, it's going to end up with a pH that is alkaline. Carnivorous plants grow in acidic soil. They only get that kind of environment from certain types of ingredients. And so ultimately, everything that is for gardening may potentially kill carnivorous plants. And a lot of people, in fact, do end up killing their first carnivorous plants because of stuff like this. This leads to a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration for people that are getting started. And this same kind of stuff really exists in a lot of different hobbies that are out there. It might not be quite as confusing as it is for carnivorous plants in some degrees, but there are certainly some hobbies where it might be even worse in a lot of ways. So if you can find this kind of same confusion in your own hobby, again, this could be another one of those key things that is really missing, something that you could help present clear, easy to understand information that's not hard to find or access. Also think about what are the main interests of people that are in the hobby, and ultimately, can they easily find that kind of stuff online? This might have to do with the next point, which is whether people can find a place online that they can freely talk about and share things about their hobby. It might also just be whether they can find the products that they need, whether they can find the correct information or the proper kind of training, perhaps, to advance in their hobby. With carnivorous plants, obviously, you not only have the products that you actually deal with, that people need to know, what they need to use, which things do they need to buy, and what stuff do they not need to buy, but you also have the plants themselves. And since products for carnivorous plants aren't really mainstream, carnivorous plants themselves are honestly not that mainstream. About the extent of carnivorous plants being mainstream that you could really consider might be something like a Venus flytrap. You can sometimes find them, in a local store like Walmart, shoved away on some dark shelf in a corner. You might also find them at a local plant nursery or something like that. But when somebody really gets into that hobby and, they pick up a random Venus flytrap from their local nursery and they like it, after a while they start wondering, is there anything else? Are there other kinds of carnivorous plants? And they start searching for things like that and come to find out, oh, there's hundreds of different kinds and there's nowhere locally that anybody can find to buy these things. A lot of times they are exclusively sold online, or they might be in nurseries that are located in very finite places around the country. If you happen to live in California, look up a place called California Carnivores, one of the best carnivorous plant nurseries in the entire country. I live on the East Coast, though. There's basically nothing over here. And so to a certain extent, it can kind of depend on, where you live can have a lot to do with it. The hobby might be popular, but it might not be super popular in your area. Well, with California and carnivorous plants, it's not that the hobby is necessarily more popular there. There are a lot more people that live in California than in the state that I live in, but the reason why carnivorous plant nurseries are commonly found in California, at least in this country, is because right along the coast you have a Mediterranean climate. You don't have the freezing winters, and so they can grow these plants with picky environmental condition requirements for simply a lot cheaper. So it's just the best place to commercially, locate to run their business. This kind of stuff, though, can really play into what you can do online about it, though, because with carnivorous plants, a lot of people simply struggle to find somewhere to buy the plant that they actually want. All those different kinds of carnivorous plants, they research them, they find out about specific kinds, and then they go out looking for somewhere to buy that specific kind. A lot of times it's not available, or you might have to wait years to try to get a hold of it, or you might have to try to find somebody that already has it themselves and they'd be willing to sell you a cutting of it or trade it to you. For this hobby, that is where the Facebook group comes in. It's not the only reason people use the Facebook groups, but one of the reasons why a lot of people like to use them is to trade stuff, to sell their own plants, to buy plants from other people. And then they also love sharing, pictures of their plants and growing tips and even horror stories and stuff like that. So hopefully this gives you some kind of an idea of, how you should be thinking about your own hobby. Hopefully if it's, a hobby that you have a decent amount of experience and knowledge with, you should be able to figure a lot of these things out, pretty quickly. Otherwise, you might have to put a little bit of research into it. If you don't have a lot of knowledge about your hobby, you might end up, having to outsource a lot of your content creation. And so you could even utilize somebody that's going to help you with that kind of stuff. And, ask them these type of questions. Try to utilize their experience and get them to help you figure out what is missing. What do people really want in that hobby, but they can't easily find? Whether it's knowledge, whether it's products, whether it's just simply the company of other people that enjoy the same thing that they enjoy. Any given hobby that you might want to consider using this strategy for, you would basically want to take and put through this same process that I've been talking to you guys about tonight. This gives you a way to kind of analyze the hobby as a whole from the perspective of, is it worth doing this entire strategy for it? I have a couple of different things here listed out for you to consider about your hobby. Any one of them isn't necessarily a deal breaker. If you can't find something that seems the best fit here, if everything else looks like it would be the perfect fit for this strategy, you can certainly try to overcome a particular part of it. For me, it's actually the products. A lot of the products I recommend for people to buy in a local retail store. The most common product that somebody wants to buy in my hobby are the plants themselves and not necessarily the equipment to grow those plants. However, the equipment in those products is a regular enough expense to justify doing this. Plus, a lot of that stuff can be a little on the pricey side. So I definitely have Amazon products that I can promote in my hobby that are $50 to $100 plus per item. Some exceptions to this, let's say you like doing crafts or some kind of art or something like that. My wife loves to craft. Ultimately, everything together that you need to do a certain kind of project, the money can add up. $10 for this, $15 for that, $5 here. In the end, you've ended up spending $100 or $200 or something to do a certain project. That is quite okay, especially if you're going to try to present this information in the form of doing projects. If your hobby is crafting and you wanted to teach people different crafting projects, and you essentially lay out, the different steps to complete it, and then you also tell them the products that they are going to need to complete it, and tell them the best place to buy those things. You'd have a pretty complete plan there, and the individual products you promote, they might not be very expensive, but combined together for each project that somebody might want to try to complete, they might need to buy more than just one item. And so that total per project at least might be more in this range that you're really looking for. You also want to ask yourself, are the Amazon products really best to be buying on Amazon itself, or are they best to buy elsewhere? It's okay, like my hobby, if you find stuff that is best to buy in a local retail store. In fact, I would encourage you to try to find at least some things that you recommend for people to buy that are not on Amazon. Otherwise, if every single thing you promote is on Amazon, they at least start to wonder, is this person recommending this product to me because it's really what I need, or are they recommending it to me just to, try to earn a commission on anything they can possibly refer a sale on? So it's good to have some variety, but you definitely need at least some decent stuff to be on Amazon that you can really drive people to purchase, or else there wouldn't be a lot of point in creating an Amazon affiliate site for something like this. You also have search traffic to consider. is there a strong potential for search engine traffic with this particular hobby? By going through your different keyword phrases, finding out the search volumes that are out there, and then ultimately trying to figure out, you know, which keyword phrases would have not an obscene amount of competition to the point where you could feasibly get a ranking for them. You don't need to see amazing numbers or amazing results for search traffic here, because that is not the only method that we are going to be using. In fact, it's the secondary method that we're going to be using to get traffic to these sites. But still, you want to see something. You don't want to have to 100% focus on only utilizing your audience for traffic. In fact, having the Facebook group as your audience, and then also having search traffic coming into your website independently, they can kind of work to cross-promote each other. Your Facebook group promotes your website can cross-promote your Facebook group. So people that are coming in off of a search engine can end up following you on Facebook group and become part of your long-term audience that way. So it's important to at least have some pieces of both aspects of that to really make this strategy work the best that it can. Audience potential, I was already kind of talking about part of that. You need to make sure that there's a good audience for your hobby that you're going to be able to reach, and they also need to be eager to consume new information and or at least engage with others that are in that hobby. You know, if it's a hobby where you share your experiences, the things you're doing in that hobby, you know, you want people to want to see that kind of stuff. If there's not going to be anyone with an interest in really sharing that hobby, then, you know, it's going to be really hard to build an audience centered around that particular hobby. So just use Facebook as essentially proof to make sure that those audiences actually exist out there, to ensure that you're going to be able to build up something, you know, along those lines to similar levels at least. And then finally, the hobby shortcomings. Can you identify the things that your online community really wants, but ultimately they can't find? You know, what's in high demand, but it's missing. Those are really going to be the things that can help you to attract that audience, that can help you to work your way into this hobby as quickly as is possible to do. So you're going to be targeting essentially the cream of the crop to get started with, and a lot of people will just be like, you know, I've been waiting for this, and you know, you don't have to convince them to go and take a look at it. For me personally, for my hobby, in addition to clearing up a lot of the confusion about how to actually grow these plants properly, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. In fact, if you ask 10 different people that grow carnivorous plants how you grow them, you're probably going to get 5 or 10 different answers. So I want to help to clear up a lot of that confusion, but I also want to teach them specific projects that allow them to get into aspects of the hobby that a lot of people are unable to do successfully. I'm mainly referring to building different things like an outdoor bog garden or an indoor grow chamber to grow these plants in, so you can control the environment for them. There's information out there about this kind of stuff. It's spread all over the place. It's a lot of stuff to really try to track down, and it's pretty confusing because some of that information contradicts itself. Ultimately, though, a lot of the projects, people that say go to a forum and they share a picture of their grow chamber, they'll talk about it. They might mention a couple of the things that they use, but ultimately they leave a lot of stuff to essentially guesswork for people to figure out on their own. And I used that same information when I got started in the hobby many years ago. And I ended up wasting a ton of money trying to build and create all of these things that ended up not working because they gave me, incomplete information essentially. And so I want to try to help correct that for other people that are just getting into the hobby. But it will also be really helpful for people that have been in it for a long time and just haven't been able to figure it out. Some of these plants that need special growing environments, they can be the size of a quarter when they're a baby. And yet they might sell for hundreds of dollars for that one tiny little plant. And yet people will buy these things and spend that kind of money on these plants and not have the proper conditions to grow them in, and then they just die. So knowing the right way to grow them and to be able to keep them alive long term is really high demand information for a lot of people that are in this hobby and haven't been able to essentially figure it out for themselves, or maybe they just haven't had the money or the patience to figure it out through trial and error. So that's really what I am trying to address in my particular hobby. What you might do in your hobby could be similar to that, or it could be completely different. Don't base it on what I'm doing and what's going to work for my hobby. Base it on ultimately what do people in your hobby want? What are they interested in? What kind of stuff would they really prefer to see from you? So go through this same checklist for your hobby. You want to start out by simply choosing a hobby that you're going to research. Then you want to research the Amazon product potential for products that would be used in that hobby that you might consider promoting. You want to look at what kind of search engine traffic potential there is. This can also extend into looking into more long-term or seasonal trends for your hobby. Look into the audience potential for your hobby, whether or not you can build one, whether or not people would actually want to engage in that hobby with others. And ultimately, how large of an audience could you potentially build up? Look into things like the high demand and low competition areas of interest. A lot of this type of stuff are going to be the things that were missing that you were able to dig up from your research. A lot of times that missing stuff from the hobby is in really high demand. It's low competition because if nobody is really doing a good job of covering that information, if they're not going into enough detail to really teach it to somebody, it's pretty easy to put that kind of stuff out there, to blow them all out of the water and to get that hobby to take notice of it. People will use information and websites like these. They'll bookmark them. They'll share them on forums. They'll share them on Facebook. They'll recommend the website to other people that are just getting started in the hobby. When people ask them questions, hey, how do I grow this, or how do I build this for these plants? It's pretty complicated to try to sit there and explain some of this stuff to somebody, especially if you get people asking you over and over again. And so a lot of people in at least the carnivorous plant hobby will just have these website pages that they refer people to all the time. So that's really what the end goal here is, to make a really great resource for your hobby and then to connect it up with an audience and ultimately be able to refer Amazon affiliate sales on all of these hobby-related products. This is really how you're going to figure out, is this hobby worth targeting, by looking at all these different aspects. Making sure you have the products there that you can sell. Making sure you're going to be able to get search traffic. making sure you can build the audience, and then making sure you have content that you can actually put out there that will have a really high interest in it, and you'll be able to get exposure for that content without having to kill yourself or without having to, pump a bunch of money into advertising. I actually did not spend anything on advertising for building my audience or getting traffic to my website. So finally, when you are confident that all these different aspects of the hobby check out okay, you can make your final hobby selection, and then we will be able to proceed on in the next training class with actually getting started on all of this work. We're actually going to begin with creating the actual audience, getting all that built up, and then we will continue on from there.